Hello and welcome to the Gooners podcast. It's me, Mike, starting off the show today for a change. Andy, my God, what has happened to you? You've completely let yourself go. You're bald. You have a huge beard now. Andy, tell us what's happening.
Well, dude, it's like this, dude. I've gone back to my English roots, dude, because I know I'm American, dude, but I was born in England. Oh, it's not me, Mike. It's not Andy. I can't do an American accent, otherwise I'd have done it.
Well, neither can he, but that doesn't stop him from trying. Danny from a Camp Wonderland, thanks for joining me today as my co-host. Everyone knows Danny from a Camp Wonderland. Andy can't be here today. We'll explain why in a second, but we want to get right to our guest. Our guest today is a real treat. He's been with us on our 100th episode. He's been with us on our 136th episode today, and he's most famous for being the voice of FIFA. I mean, he's most famous to 10-year-olds for being the most famous voice on FIFA. But to guys like me, he's an Arsenal legend. He's an author. He's a journalist. Don't call him a pundit. He won the first season of Britain's Got Talent, little known fact. And most of all, he's a guy who mastered the fact and the art of kicking the ball into the little net thingy a lot of times in the biggest games. It's only Alan Smith. Thanks for coming back, Alan.
It's a pleasure, mate. Pleasure.
Nice to see you. Good to see you again.
About my Britain's Got Talent win.
It's the one I watched. You won, you know.
Yeah, it's juggling.
Exactly. You're juggling a lot of things. I can't believe we didn't scare you off the first time, honestly. But I don't know if you know this, but Andy, my co-host, the reason he's not here is because he's barely a week away from being crowned 2019 Spring C League Co-ed Indoor Soccer Champion in the suburban Denver area. So today's the open top bus tour through Colorado. They're going through the whole state of Colorado, and I think he's got his priorities mixed up. He should have been here, but it's a big day for him. So I got Danny with me instead. Danny and I were actually named laziest football supporters by 440 magazine. So we've got that going for us, which is nice. So Danny, so Alan, since you joined us on the pod, you helped to provide a very cool moment for me and for a lot of American Gooners. I just want to briefly touch on that at the Emirates. First, you helped us very kindly raise some money for our Gooners versus Cancer charity last year by signing a few copies of your book, Heads Up, which is a fantastic book. Everyone should go out and get it. And people bid on that, made substantial contributions to the charity. And by the time our Arsenal America trip came to London in October, the books were ready to be picked up. So what does Alan do? He messages me to see if I'm going to the Leicester game, which 50 or 60 of us were, and meets me as our group of 50 or 60 people go out onto the pitch to take a picture, a group photo on the pitch. There's Smudge standing there in the players' tunnel, holding me a bag with books, waiting for me, of all people, hands it to me with a warm handshake. And then I ask him if he's got 2 minutes to join the rest of us for our pitch side picture. And Alan goes, "Are you sure that you guys won't mind?" This is the humbleness of Mr. Alan Smith. And I said, "No, I don't think they'll mind at all." We walk out, and I get my moment in the sun, which is, "Hey guys, do you think it'd be all right if I get my mate Alan to join us for this picture?" And needless to say, you made dozens of American Gooners' day that day. And there's a picture online which we tweeted out. It was a real magnanimous gesture. So first of all, thank you for.
Oh, that was okay, mate. My pleasure.
Thank you for helping with the charity, and thank you for making people's day. So, how's your next book coming?
Yeah, I've not thought of the title yet, or indeed the ingredients. But
I have a title suggestion.
Stage, I might do one. We'll see, because. Yeah, I mean, it was good fun writing my autobiography, but obviously if you do something else, it's going to be much different, writing about a different topic apart from yourself. But maybe sometime in the too distant future, I'll have a crack at something.
Well, if you're looking for a title, I could suggest It's Just a Video Game, People. Get over it. That could be the title.
Oh,
and then
okay. Yeah, no, good. I'll bear that.
So this pod is not our normal weekly review of games. Thank goodness the season's over. But the next 2 weeks contain 2 landmark dates, and they're both connected to Alan. So that's why we were really pleased to have you back on today. The first is on Sunday. It's the 30th anniversary of the greatest day of my life, personally. And then the second is Wednesday, our opportunity to bring home a European Cup title for the first time since '94, Copenhagen, when a particular Arsenal striker scored the lone goal in a 1-0 win against some team named after pork products, ham, and not West Ham either. But Danny, did you know I lived in London in 1989? Were you aware of this? Have I ever mentioned this to you or to anybody?
No, I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I keep it pretty quiet, but
you weren't there, were you?
Well, I've just decided actually that within the past week or so that I was there.
My daughter was there. She's 21 at the weekend. She was there as well.
Yeah, I mean we're that's what I'm going with. But anyone in their Arsenal history knows about May 26, 1989. It's the most dramatic climax to a football season in the history of football. And do not give me this May 2012 Manchester City stuff, right, Alan? I mean, come on.
Correct. Yeah. No, they don't compare. I was having a discussion on Twitter the other day with somebody who's a Man City fan, and just trying to explain the differences. Obviously the Aguero moment was great from Premier League standards, but they were playing QPR, who were fighting relegation, and 5 minutes before the Aguero goal, they'd heard that they were safe because the result elsewhere had gone the way. QPR were down to 10 men, so it's not quite like playing 4 times European champions who never used to lose at home, and having to beat them by 2 goals. So, and not only that, it was a standalone game, the 2 teams vying for the title head to head. The country was watching after the end of all the other fixtures. So the circumstances of it will never be repeated. The Premier League would never allow that to happen, I'm sure. So it was a one-off, and it always will be a one-off.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid, you had to beat QPR at Highbury in 1989 instead of Liverpool. But and the one factor, of course, is we don't know whether this is true or not. But I mean, Joey Barton may or may not have had a personal interest in financial interest in Man City winning. So there's a lot of factors that make them different. But there's no question of that. So in August, we spoke to you for about an hour or so, spent a lot of time talking about this game. And, even though it's the 30th anniversary, we don't want to ask a bunch of repetitive questions. So if you missed the August podcast, go back and listen to it. I've tweeted it out recently. It's on our YouTube page. For those of you in the chat, we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions with regards to 89. So if you do have questions, we'll try to get as many as we can into Alan. The 30th anniversary is Sunday, actually, and I know my local mates and I are planning on watching the 89 film and the game in a continuous loop. We're going to roll around on the floor like a fish, standing on our necks like Michael Thomas, and then walk around going like this for a minute and then just laughing at each other. But
with that Mickey Thomas celebration, just be careful with it.
Yeah, I mean, people have been sent to the hospital for that, but now, you mentioned right before we got on the podcast that you had a dinner last night. Tell us a little bit, if you can, about what that was all about, and if you have any plans for the actual day on Sunday.
No plans for Sunday really, but yeah, it was really nice last night. Lee Dixon actually was behind organising it, and it was at the Emirates, and quite a few of the boys came. So there was David O'Leary, Kevin Campbell, John Lukic, Paul Davies, Tony Adams, Lee, who else? There were quite a few. Niall Quinn. There was a really good collection. George Graham, Theo Foley, Pat Rice was there. So it was really lovely to see everyone together. A lot of fans came, lots of tables. It was a dinner. And we had a big screen up, and they're playing the film, and they played a certain few sections of it. Some of us came up on stage and answered questions and everything. Really, really good night. So it was just lovely to relive it. 30 years. I can't believe it's been 30 years, to be honest. But it was good to. We all came together for the premiere of the film, which was what was that, 18 months ago, something now, I don't know. So that was nice. But yeah, so to come together again like that. I do see some of the lads like Lee, Kev Campbell through the media, you know, we would go to the same games, but people like John Lukic I hadn't seen for a long time. Quinny had come over from Ireland, Alan Miller, my old roommate in the latter years, our goalkeeper. So it was a great night, really good. And it helped raise a lot of money for charity as well.
That's wonderful. It's always nice to put a meaningful thing behind a celebration as well. Danny, what do you have planned for the big day on Sunday? You catered dinner, some samba dancing, rolling over people's feet?
We are actually having a big party. I've spent a fortune getting a bouncy castle, an adult bouncy castle. We went to Booker's yesterday and spent 250 quid on drinks and stuff. Oh, it's my daughter's having a birthday party on Sunday. That's why we're doing all of this. Yeah, so we are having a celebration, but it's not because of Anfield 89. But I will let them all know. There's only one bloke coming.
It's about Anfield 89. You don't have to, you don't have to admit to that. Quickly, just to really briefly cover those home matchups against Derby and Wimbledon. Sorry, we covered them a lot in our last podcast. But do you ever see Peter Shilton around these days? And are you still mad at him?
Mad at him for what? For making all the saves?
Yeah, for doing things at the age of almost 40 that most 21-year-olds could only dream of doing.
Yeah, he did have a world. I mean, listen, he was.
He couldn't stop you completely.
Pardon?
He couldn't stop you completely.
He couldn't stop me. No, he's good, but he's not that good. Yeah, we were just really tense and nervous that day, and probably the crowd were as well. And Shilts made all those saves, and then you start thinking that it's just not going to be your day. And then Dean Saunders, who got a couple, said afterwards that it was one of the best days of his life because he's a Liverpool fan and he wanted to help him win the title. So we thought, oh, blimey, cheers, Dino. Yeah, but, yeah, not a great day to remember. We came off the pitch really down, and then looking forward to the Wimbledon game, hoping we could put it right.
Yeah, I mean, I think before the Derby game, you guys were 5 points ahead of Liverpool. They had a game in hand by the time the Wimbledon game was over, and then the next day, the Liverpool-West Ham game, it was 3 points back, and just a really, really nervy time around North London. We have a question from one of our great podcast users, 312 Gooner at Clough31 on Twitter. What a season and a win against Liverpool to secure the title. What did that 89 Arsenal squad have that our current squad could use the most?
I don't know. I don't like to compare squads and say ours was better than this one. What we did have was a real togetherness, a never say die attitude. We couldn't be bullied. We stuck together. We knew exactly what we wanted to do. We went out on the pitch, and that was all down to George Graham, really, because he worked on the training ground tirelessly on our shape and our individual roles. And I think Unai Emery's quite similar in that regard. You know, he puts a lot of thought into that on the training ground. But any successful team's got to have that spirit and determination. You know, we had it. We wouldn't take no for an answer. We just kept going. And you know, it's a relatively new thing with Emery's team. He's gathering the people together that he wants within that group, and I'm sure in time, it doesn't happen overnight. I'm sure in time, you know, he'll get that. That's what he'll be striving to achieve anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of impatience going on around here these days. It's just, I think maybe more so than comparing teams is comparing expectations of different eras. And it's just, unfortunately, a whole different world now compared to back then. Danny, any memories of your experiences in '89? Were you at the Derby and Wimbledon games? Did you travel up to Liverpool for that one? I know you've told us you were there, but were you really there?
No, that season I went to, I think, 11 games. The last one I went to was the home game. I only ever went to home games. It was the home game against Charlton. But something that I did want to ask you, Alan, is we lost 3-1 away at Forest, then we drew 2-2 with Charlton, and then we conceded another goal against Southampton. And that's when George Graham started playing three at the back. That's when Steve Bold came in. Was that because we'd been conceding so many goals, or was there another reason behind that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you ask George now, and he says because he wanted to try it out with Anfield in mind. Maybe that's not, the whole truth. As you say, leaking a few goals, which was not like us, and just trying something different. I mean, for the majority of the season, we were playing four at the back, weren't we? And when we heard George was going to play five, I mean, it wasn't a massive shock because we had played it, but we did think, well, it's a bit of a risk, because it is slightly different. And it does take time to adjust to that. But I think, with Anfield in mind, he wanted the wing backs, Lee and Nigel, to be pushing on to John Barnes and Ray Houghton. That's how he explained it to us. He wanted them to, because he saw them as the danger men who can make the team tick. So that's why he said he wanted to play those central three and the two wing backs.
Another question, if I can. During that season, we played 7 friendlies. At the beginning of the season, we played the Mercantile Credit Trophy, which was to celebrate 100 years of the Football League, beat Man United 2-0 in the final. And then looking back at all the fixtures, I forgot that we played a testimonial against Shrewsbury, which you played in. And you played in most of these games. Then we went on a tour of Bermuda in the end of January that year. You played both of those games, and then we played France in a friendly. And I tell people, middle of the season, we played a friendly against France. People think I was crazy, but we played on the 11th against Millwall, and we played on the 18th against QPR. But on the 14th, in the middle of that run, why were we playing France?
I don't know. Michel
That's crazy,
wasn't he? I remember him stood there in his Mac on the sideline. But it was a tough game, that. And I don't think any of us actually asked why we were playing France. I think they were over here, maybe having some friendlies, and I don't remember the Shrewsbury testimonial, but you know what it was like then, Danny. There wasn't any rotation. There was a very small squad, 13, 14, or 15 at the most, really, and we just played. I remember the pitch was awful against France, really, really bobbly. But we ended up beating them, which was quite nice. I think me and Hazy scored. But yeah, we played a lot of games. Last night, actually, they had a little quiz, and they said how many players were league ever presents in that season, and I think there were 3. Which would have been John Lukic. I don't know. Tony Adams and Dave Rocastle. I don't know the other 2, actually. I don't think they actually explained who it was. But the rest of us, the 3 ever presents, and the rest of us, I think I played 36, something like that. And there were a lot of boys on that amount of games, played the majority of the season.
Lukic, Rocastle and Nutty all played 38, and you and Tony Adams played 36.
There you go.
Plus the 15 friendlies. With only 2 subs on the bench. For each game. And I think 10 years later, they played another friendly against France, but it was just called an intra-squad scrimmage after France won the World Cup, or after Arsenal won the World Cup. Yes. So that's 1989. Believe me, I could spend and would love to spend an hour or 2 talking about this, but we want to be respectful of your time, not repetitive to the things we talked about before. And of course, there's a second reason why we wanted to have you on today, which is to speak about something else that you have a little bit of experience with, which is European Cup finals. So it's 25 years this month since Copenhagen, a 1-0 victory against Parma. It's still, to this day, our last European title. Danny, I was in college in 1994, so I didn't get to watch this game. I'm sure you have a memory.
I watched it at home because back then trying to watch games on TV was really hard, and so you're on about the 94 Cup Winners' Cup final against Parma.
Yep.
Yeah, I watched that at home. It was very rare you got to watch a game. One of the few games I actually got to watch was we played Independiente of Argentina, a friendly, and for some reason that was on at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. That was the how weird it was with the games they played. But I remember the final, and I remember thinking Parma, they are one hell of a team with Brolin and Asprilla and all these other wonderful players. I thought we had no chance. Especially as Ian Wright was suspended for it, I think.
Yeah, well, you have a chance anytime you've got number 9 firing for you. But we bring this up, obviously, because of the Europa League Final on Wednesday. We're not going to review Parma. Again, you can hear about that in our August interview. But I do have 2 questions I want to ask that we didn't really get to last time. Alan, English clubs were banned from European competition as a result of Heysel, starting in 1985 and going pretty much through 1990-91. And the actions, it was based on the actions of Liverpool supporters on a particular day. But really, to me, I mean, it was a time where hooliganism wasn't necessarily, just connected to Liverpool. It was really a black mark on England from the rest of Europe. The ban ended up lasting pretty much right through the early prime of your Arsenal career, and it robbed Arsenal of 3 UEFA Cups, 1 European Cup appearance, and the UEFA Cup wasn't like the Europa League is now. It was minus the actual champions of each league. It was the next 2 or 3 teams from all the top leagues, so it was a prestigious competition. How did you and your teammates feel about really being robbed from the opportunity to participate in those competitions when, traditionally you'd earned the right to be there? Was there bitterness, frustration?
No, disappointment, I think, because having worked so hard to win the league and you'd grown up watching the European Cup, and, I was a Villa fan as a boy. I'd seen my team win it, and obviously Liverpool had Nottingham Forest, and they were special times, and you'd think, wow, we've won the title, we've won the league, and now we can't enter this competition. So, yeah, we were all disappointed. Then we had a chance 2 years later after winning it in 91, of course. But, yeah, I mean, we all had to accept it, didn't we? That was how it was back then. I think there was talk that, they'd come down too hard on the English clubs when, maybe fans in other countries weren't punished so heavily. But thank goodness, we did sort all that out. And we went on again to dominate Europe for a spell, and we have this year again. So,
oh my God,
yeah, but
a little too much in my opinion. But
yeah. Well, we'll see. I know a lot of Arsenal fans last night they said, I can't watch the Champions League final, just in case Spurs win it. But we've got to do our business and try and beat Chelsea, and we can't do much about what happens in Madrid.
I've told my family that if we don't win the Europa League, I'm just, not only am I not watching it, I'm throwing away all of our televisions because I don't even want, and I'm throwing away the internet. I'm getting rid of the internet. My kids are going to kill me. But
yeah.
In your time at Arsenal, you raised 2 First Division trophies, an FA Cup, a League Cup, 2 Golden Boot awards, and in '94, finally the Cup Winners' Cup trophy. Are the feelings any different when and I know there's more nuance to this as it relates to the timing of your career and what was going on, but just can you compare the feeling of raising a European trophy versus a domestic trophy?
No, they are different. They are different.
I know you love comparing things, but
yeah, I mean, I suppose you could compare Anfield '89 with the Cup Winners' Cup because it was, it's a one-off, wasn't it? Almost Anfield '89, so that felt like you'd won a cup final. But obviously you get judged over 38 games with the league, and it was, I don't know how many games we played to lift the European Cup Winners' Cup, but
it was about 10 maybe, because it was 32 teams, 2 legs, and 1 in the final, so maybe 9.
Yeah, and we were a different team in '94, and we were a very good cup team because we've got the back 4, the back 5 with Dave Seaman, and we've got Ian Wright, and obviously that's when 1-0 to the Arsenal was born. So we could nick games, which that was much different to our league-winning campaigns. But it was a great thrill because, as Danny just said, Parma were the massive favourites with all the players that they had, and with us having Righty out and Martin Keown out, Dave Hillier failed the fitness test. It was midfield, to say the least, was makeshift with Ian Selly and Stevie Morrow. I mean, they played brilliantly on the night next to Paul Davis, but you're going into it thinking, we're going to do ever so well to stay in this match. Never mind about winning. So at the end, it was an amazing feeling.
I can imagine. And moving to our cup final coming up on Wednesday, Baku, Azerbaijan, kicking off at 11 p.m. Unfortunately, as you know, the narrative on this game seems to be almost less about the game itself and more about everything outside of the game. And we've been talking about it here on the podcast and on other podcasts for a couple of weeks. My feelings have been expressed pretty clearly, but I'm interested in yours to the extent that you can share them with us. How do you feel with regards to, forget Mkhitaryan for a second and that whole issue, but just the logistical and the details of how Baku came to be hosting this cup final?
Well, I can understand the theory. FIFA do it as well. They want to spread the love, spread the destinations in the world. And with UEFA in Europe, I mean, Azerbaijan in Europe, actually, technically, I don't know, but they're right on the fringes of it, aren't they?
Eurasia.
If a team from Russia and Ukraine had got to the final, nobody would be saying much. But it's not worked out well for UEFA, two English clubs. But, they...
Uh-oh. Let's all ponder what Alan was saying, because I think we've lost him for a second here.
Sorry, the phone was ringing now. I lost you for a second. Yeah, I mean, UEFA knew the deal. They knew that it was going to be difficult for a lot of teams from a lot of countries. If it was a French or a German team, it's still going to be equally as difficult, isn't it, to get to Baku? So whether they thought a lot of the locals would take up their allocation, they misjudged that, it sounds like. And they maybe misjudged the amount of fans from Chelsea and Arsenal that would want to go. So in the end, it looks like we're going to have a half-empty stadium, which is just the last thing that you want for a showpiece final. So it's an embarrassment for UEFA, no doubt about it. And hopefully they'll learn lessons from that. But, that one of their mottos is, football is for the fans, I think, something like that. And it goes directly against that, doesn't it? It's such a shame. Such a huge night for both clubs, both sets of fans. And, it's turned into an anticlimax, really, in terms of, that everyone wants to be there, don't they? And so many people aren't going to be able to be there.
It's got to be so strange of an environment and a weird ramping up and preparation for that game. UEFA also has other kind of concepts and mottos, and most of them include fighting racism, exclusionariism, and inclusion being a big part of their platform. Can you tell us, how you feel about the Mkhitaryan situation? And now I'll set the stage a little bit. I mean, everybody knows the situation, but tracing back to August when the competition really started, and we were in fact drawn against Karabakh in the group stage. My thought is there's three parties to this. Actually, four, if you include fans, some of whom are of Armenian descent. You've got UEFA, completely responsible. You've got Arsenal, who had to make some choices. You've got Mkhitaryan and his family, of course, who had to make choices. And then you've got some of the fans who would be willing to travel there but aren't allowed. But your thoughts, Alan, on what you would have liked to have seen the club do or see the club do, or if they've handled it in a way that you'd be endorsing?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, UEFA insists that, he could go there, no problem. He would be looked after. I can understand the players' reluctance, and he's thinking of his family more than himself. I mean, before this all kicked off, I didn't realise that Armenia, had occupied some land right smack bang in the middle of Azerbaijan. I don't know how that came about, but obviously Azerbaijan aren't going to be too keen about that and about Armenia in general. It's such a shame, isn't it, that this has happened. I can't remember it happening too many times in the past where we've had this kind of. I'm sure there have been, times, but listen, I mean, Mkhitaryan, he's had one or two good little spells, but he's disappointed in the main, I think, for me. So from that point of view, I maybe don't see it as too much of a loss, but you want your full squad there. And the fact that he's not going to be there is wrong. So it's just another kind of brick in the wall. It's just such a shame that things have turned out this way. And I'm sure the player himself, you'd hope the player himself is really disappointed he's not going to be able to take part, because you never know when this kind of occasion is going to come around again.
Yeah, I mean, and by all accounts, he is disappointed. He's now had to be accused of making political statements by people in Azerbaijan, by their ambassador. But the worst thing, possibly the worst thing, is that Arsenal and of course Chelsea supporters who have Armenian descent or stamps on their passport or last names that end in IAN or YAN have been denied visas and denied the opportunity to come to the game as a supporter. And they're willing to spend the money, they're willing to make the travel, and they're not being allowed to, which I think is. They even tried. Danny, did you know they tried to ban Ian Wright because they saw the Ian part of his name and they thought he was from Armenia? No.
Well, I've heard ex-Leeds midfielder John Sheridan has had a nightmare getting there.
So yeah, I mean it's just logistically, but let's put that on the back burner now. And although with one other question, you don't have to expand on this if you don't want, Alan, but there's been a lot of talk online, some from journalists and pundits, some from Arsenal supporters, some from just commenters from the outside about the concept of a boycott. And the boycott to make a point, to make a stand, to accept whatever punishment comes into play and say some things are bigger than money or football or glory. Based on UEFA's response to the concept of if anyone even chants or holds banners that are anti-UEFA, that leads me to some concern that they may make Arsenal suffer so bad that we'll end up being surpassed by Sutton United in the league format. But what are your thoughts on the concept of a boycott? If there's any reality that could have happened in that situation at any point, maybe not now, and if you think that if that's just a kind of a pipe dream or a little optimistic.
What are you on about, a boycott because of the Mkhitaryan issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say through a lot of issues, but really it would come down to the human rights and those elements if they really wanted to make a stand on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure whether that would help, really. Everyone's worked so hard to get to this point, and another 90 minutes, 120 minutes, you don't really want to pull out because of it, as upset as you are.
And then,
so I don't think probably Arsenal would have considered that. So yeah.
There's a question from Peter Kennelly who says, say there was a situation whereby an Arsenal player wasn't allowed to play at Anfield that night for reasons not connected to football, like if they had a ban on people named Tony or Lee, that the ban on Allen would have hurt them as well. So we can't use that. But do you think that the team would have just gone on and played the game, or would there have been discussion about a boycott? I guess based on your previous answer, I know what this is going to be, but we wanted to read the player's answer. I mean, can you even imagine a situation within Europe where certain people would say you're not welcome?
Well, we've had very similar talks and discussions about racism, haven't we, over the last few months, with Raheem Sterling being at the centre of it, and whether the lads should walk off the pitch, as a show of protest. I mean, UEFA, I'm sure they'd come down hard on any fans displaying anti-UEFA banners, but there's some paltry fines, as we saw in Italy recently, for fans yelling racist abuse at players. So there's a contradiction there.
Yeah.
I think more often than not, players would look to the club to make any kind of a stand rather than initiating it themselves.
Sure. Well, let's get on to the game itself then, because obviously, as I mentioned, there's been too little attention paid to the game, so it doesn't do any good for us to pay attention to everything other than the game. Massive stakes for Arsenal, other than maybe a few times in the last 20 years where we've had fourth place and Champions League qualification go down to the last day of the season. I don't know that there's been that much financially and pride-wise and transfer policy-wise at stake in in a one-off game. Chelsea's already in the group stage of the Champions League next season. Arsenal really, really need this one. To me, the lineup in the second game in Valencia was just about the best 11 I think we could have put out there. Mainsley, Koscielny, and Socrates at the back. Monreal at the back. Maitland-Niles and Kolasinac as a wing-back. Xhaka Torreira in the middle, and then Ozil, Lacazette, and Aubameyang up top. What are your thoughts on how we approach this match? Does Chelsea pose different kinds of threats where we should set up differently? Where does Welbeck fit in? What are your thoughts on the on-pitch aspect of the game?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's good to on Welbeck. It's good to have him back, but I certainly wouldn't see him playing a part in the starting 11. But I mean, that team that started in Valencia, it looked really good, didn't it? And I don't think there's any question that Aubameyang and Lacazette won't play together. Ozil, I don't know. He'll be. I mean, Emery will be thinking about Eden Hazard. What do we do? Do we make special provisions for him? He'll want to be attacking. Yeah, that's our strength, isn't it? Attacking. There's no doubt about that. We're not suited to sitting there and frustrating the opposition. So I think he'll be fairly bold. Not rash, but he'll feel that if we get enough of the ball and we use it as well as we did in Valencia, we can do some damage to Chelsea. You'd never bank on us keeping a clean sheet against Chelsea, but we can hurt them, and that's our strength in this match, I think.
Yeah, we have seemed to have done quite well against Chelsea in recent years, and some of the players are there. Well, obviously, new coaching, and we know that Unai Emery is no stranger to playing in a Europa League final. He's not going to want to have this be the end of his 100% streak there. So, but do you think the team under his guidance, knowing how they've gone through the last 6 weeks of the season, has the mentality to brush that aside and the travel, the dead atmosphere that we're going to have? Do you think that the mentality is there for this team to be able to come through and put it away early, hopefully?
Well, listen, it should be. If your mind's not right for a game like this, you've got to put all the outside things to the back of your mind and just think about your individual jobs, your job as a team. And, we were talking about that togetherness, that determination a few moments ago, and they've got to show that. There's so much at stake. Everybody wants to be in the Champions League, so that it's a massive dangling carrot for the Arsenal boys. You could argue that Chelsea, the pressure's off. They've already qualified for that competition. They can play with a little bit more freedom. I'm not so sure about that, because it's not just about qualifying for the Champions League. It's about the trophy. It's about winning that match, lifting the Europa League Cup. So
it's hardly a dead rubber for them. I mean, they do like their European trophies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and of course, Maurizio Sarri, there's a lot of question marks swirling around him. But were Chelsea to win the Europa League, God forbid, they've had a fantastic season under the Italian. And whether that would persuade Abramovich and friends to keep him, I don't know. But no, from our boys' point of view, there's so much to go for. And if the stadium's half empty, there'll be a disappointment there. You go out for a warm-up, you want to see it absolutely chock full, as we did in Parma in '94, and that gives you a lift. But once the whistle goes, you kind of put that, you ignore that, you're not aware of it really, and you knuckle down to the job in hand. So, the boys should be right on it, and I'm sure they'll be fired up.
Definitely, and there have been a little bit of mind games, it seems, from Chelsea in the last week or so. Just some interestingly timed things happening. We've got Olivier Giroud signing a new contract. Now, he's not an Arsenal player, but a lot of people still consider him family. But coming out in the press the week before the game saying his blood is now blue. Olivier Giroud, by the way, someone who Wikipedia and some other people have drawn some comparisons to a certain Arsenal player of the past. Have you heard those before? No. I mean, you're obviously a better looking version, but and a more talented.
Oh, I thought you were talking about his comments. Oh no, yeah. Well, Arsene Wenger came up with that comparison a few years ago, and then I went down to interview Olivier because of it. But I mean, he's got to show commitment to Chelsea, hasn't he? They're paying his wages now, and I know that kind of stings with Arsenal fans because he had such a close connection. But I suppose in a way he's saying what he feels the Chelsea fans want to hear. He doesn't want them to think there's any kind of half and half allegiance there.
Of course, I mean he couldn't have said anything other than that. It just again in the context of the game coming up, it does seem quite a bit staged, but so they have the ability to stage it, so why not? The second thing, of course, is an announcement that somehow slipped out. Not by Petr Cech, but just leaked out somehow this week that Petr Cech has agreed to join Chelsea as their sporting director in the summer. Something that he is smartly denied doing or saying, he's saying doing all the right things. And there is no question he's a consummate professional. But, I've got to wonder how that just snuck out there a week before the game. Interesting public announcement policy there or whatever, public relations. But Andrew the Hinckley Gooner, who's in our chat right now, sent in the question, Smudge, being completely honest, no corporate responses. Not that you would ever give one. Would you be happy playing check and goal in the final, knowing that he's playing against his future colleagues? I know he wouldn't throw one in, but it's got to subconsciously be on his mind. I have a feeling your answer is going to be a certain way, but I mean, given that this news has come out, do you think it makes any difference?
It's been less than ideal, of course it has, and the player himself, Petr Cech, must be going, oh my God, that's the last thing I wanted, on the eve of a huge game, my last game for Arsenal, if he does get picked, and I think he will get picked, because it would send out the wrong signals if he didn't. He's a popular figure in the dressing room. He's been an important presence there. He's going to be a loss, even though, he's not been number one choice in the league. And if he was dropped, I think the lads would go, oh, that's not right. I think as a teammate, you go, that's not right. He's played in every round. We know he'll be committed. He'll give his best. So I think it would leave a sour taste. And I would be amazed if Unai Emery, did leave him out because of that. Bernd Leno is obviously the number one now, but Petr Cech, I think, will play. And, the situation won't affect him, I don't think. He's a top pro, has been all his career. So I know fans would get worried about that. But as a player, you're not thinking of all these outside things when you go out onto that pitch. And he'd be desperate to finish his Arsenal career on a high. It's not gone how he would have wanted, I don't think, when he first joined. But he'll be desperate to finish it on a high.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone would question his professional approach to the game. To me, and the key word of what Andrew said and the way that I feel about it is subconscious. The subconscious of knowing that, in a few weeks you're going to be making possibly personnel decisions on these people you can focus on the 90 minutes as much as possible. And I say this as a former professional athlete, clearly, but it's the subconscious, it's the preparation thinking, are people going to think if I make a mistake that it's fixed or that I did it because I didn't care enough? Sometimes it would seem to me that subconscious lead up can affect your performance, and that's less than ideal. I don't see for a minute Unai Emery saying, because of this, that Petr Cech didn't even leak it out there. Because of this, I'm going to change and put Bernd Leno in. I don't see it happening, but I am concerned about it, I guess, is the way of saying that. But Andrew sent in another question, and we'd actually talked briefly before the podcast about Danny, who's disappeared with some technical issues. He had a memory of something that had happened 30 years ago with you. Andrew has another one. He told us that apparently at some point in his past, his Alan Smith moment took place in the lobby of a Radisson somewhere after a Carling Cup match where you and Jeff Shreves apparently spent some time with him and a couple of very drunk blokes that he was with and played championship manager with them for a bit. And he wants to know if you remember this momentous occasion for you and where it ranks on your life's achievements.
Well, I hate to say it, but I don't remember that. I remember going into the bar at the Radisson on many an occasion after a night game. We always used to stop at that hotel, and I remember chatting to fans and that. Although I have worked on FIFA for a good number of years, I don't really play it too often, and I certainly don't play Championship Manager, so I wouldn't know what I was doing. Yeah, we probably went over and had a drink and a chat and had a bit of a mess about, but I don't really remember that. I don't know how many years ago it was he's talking, but
we should do a show next season where we just get like 50 or 60 people to tell me their one interaction with you that they had 10, 15, 35 years ago. And we'll just quiz you to see how many of them you remember. So
probably not many.
Yeah. Any other questions from the chat about the Europa League? I mean, there's really, I think, so little to talk about that hasn't already been discussed, and we want to leave time for our user questions because we got some great ones here. So if Danny comes back, he'll help with that, and he has a question. I think his internet is down, actually, so I'm going to finish us off. So we have a question from Jake Feinberg at Arsenal JF on Twitter. This is a great young listener of ours. Says, my father spends every day talking about the 26th of May, 1989, from the moment he wakes up until he's fast asleep. I'm 15 now, and I feel like I don't have a father. Can you please tell him he has a family and 2 kids that are going off to college soon?
Wow. That's extreme, isn't it? He's still talking about it. Wow.
Yeah, that's my son, Jake, by the way.
Oh, that's your son. I didn't say anything derogatory there, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's all right. I think he wants you to give me back to him. So.
I grant you. Yeah, I'll release you.
Okay, perfect. And he asked a serious question. That wasn't his question. His real question was, who do you find more entertaining to watch? Messi, Ronaldo, or Al and Mustafi? No, just Messi and Ronaldo. Where he wants you to settle the debate once and for all.
Yeah, everyone loves to kind of choose between the two.
Another comparison for you to choose.
Everyone loves to do that. I mean, both playing, at their pomp as they have been, are just both compelling to watch. I mean, we've had more Messi lately, haven't we? In some of the later rounds, the home game against Liverpool when he was exceptional, got that free kick. And the games before that, when he's kind of won matches on his own, he's astonishing the way he keeps on going. But Ronaldo's the same. You asked me to choose. Messi's slightly more of a team player, but I mean, I just
more entertaining. I mean, I don't know what the guideline is for that, but
yeah, I know. It depends what you like in football. If you like somebody, climbing at the far post and powering in a header, you're not going to see Messi do that too many times. Ronaldo's a brilliant header of the ball. So I suppose those jinky runs of Messi's, those are things you look at. Ronaldo doesn't do that quite so much anymore. The foot overs and that, he's changed his game. But it's an amazing era for us that we've got these 2 players, 2 of the best that have ever played the game of football,
who really seem to want to one-up each other. I mean, I'm sure that they are not rivals in the personal sense behind the scenes, but professionally, when you have 2 people with those kinds of talents who really do want to be known as the best, it seems important to both of them. The levels just go absolutely nuts.
Yeah, but there are egos involved, aren't there? There's bound to be, and I think that does push them on.
So, by the way, Andrew, the Hinckley Gooner is devastated and mortally wounded that you don't remember the night in the Radisson that you spent with him. Well, that sounded bad. From Steve Moore at Gunnermore 1978 on Twitter. Now, this is something I've heard before. I know that you've heard it before, but once and for all, why does Alan seem to be overly harsh on Arsenal while commentating?
Well, I think fans will listen to it with a different ear to maybe a neutral. I don't think I'm overly harsh. I just try and be fair, and maybe people expect me to err on the side of Arsenal, but I just try and avoid doing that because I'm commentating for both sets of fans when people switch on the telly. So, if I have gone the other way a little bit too much, I hold my hands up. I'm sorry about that, but I just try and do my best. I just try and be fair, really. I love Arsenal Football Club, but I can't be a tub thumper on there for Arsenal when I'm commentating. That just goes against my nature. I just have to try and be fair to both sides and be equal as much as, I want Arsenal to be successful. So I do get that leveled at me, but, there's no agenda there whatsoever. Arsenal's in my blood, and it always will be. But I have a job to do, and I try and do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah, and Nicky Wilson states in the chat, he says, he is actually neutral, not like the Liverpool brigade. And I'm not asking you to speak on any of your fellow pundits, but there do seem to be pundits who who played for certain teams who tend to still think that they're playing for certain teams when it comes to their comments. And I think it's the sign of a professional broadcaster that, is able to separate the two, as frustrating as it may be for fans who want, a homer. Lee Dixon, we hear Lee Dixon all the time over here in the States. And quite often he's doing games that Chelsea are playing in or Spurs are playing in. And, he's on a par with anybody as a color commentator, as we call him, and clearly doesn't show any bias one way or the other. Although sometimes he spars with Graham Lasso when they're doing a 3-man booth, but as you should. From the lovely Becca, who is also in the chat, at Gunnar Becca on Twitter, what advice would you give a 12-year-old footballer, her nephew in this case, who wants to make the sport his career?
To stay nice and relaxed. Don't try and get too intense about it. To enjoy your football. To obviously practice really hard. If you love the game, practicing won't be a chore. It never was with me. But don't see it as the be-all and end-all. Have other interests as well. Obviously, the more you practice, the better you get. That's undeniable. But don't put all your eggs in one basket. When I was growing up, I was serious about my studies as well. I knew there was a slim chance of making it, and there's a tiny chance of making it, in the professional game at the top level. So I think that's the thing with kids. Some, see the money and the fame, and that's what they go for, which is the wrong way to pursue it. You've got to have a love for the game and just want to be as good as you possibly can at it, and that only comes with practice. But yeah,
how big a part do the parents play in all of this as well? Because we have a huge, I don't know over there, but we have a huge problem over here with parents who seem to want it for their kids more than the kids want it themselves.
Yeah, exactly. It's a meal ticket. They see it as, I think, living out their dreams and fantasies through their child, and putting too much pressure on that kid. I mean, I saw it when I was growing up. There were dads that were screaming at their lads right through the 90 minutes of matches, and it affected these boys. So yeah, just try and keep a level, kind of attitude to it. Do your best, but if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world.
Excellent. And for this particular 12-year-old's father, he has to choose a better football club to support so his child doesn't get disillusioned, because my belief is that her brother is a Manchester United fan. So that's my advice. Not that it was asked for, but Alan's, yours is fantastic. Hopefully it'll make its way to her nephew. From Mr. DJ, as a former player with the club, do you personally believe the club had to move from Highbury and couldn't just have redeveloped the North Bank and Clock End to increase capacity to 50,000 instead of moving to the Emirates? Or was the move absolutely necessary, in your opinion?
I think they did look at extending. Obviously, the East and the West, they couldn't really do much with, and that's probably what held them back. The North Bank had already been developed. So corporate hospitality is such a big thing these days, isn't it? So there's a limitation to what they could do with that as well. They're looking at Old Trafford that was housing about 70,000, and they just felt they had to move. And I still speak to an awful lot of fans that pine for Highbury. They still haven't fallen in love with the Emirates. But say if we were to clinch a league title there or something, you need memories associated with these new grounds, and we've had a few, but maybe not enough. It's called progress, isn't it? Liverpool have stayed where they are. I think they're going to extend. A bit more difficult for Highbury, where it was situated, in amongst those the flats at the back of the Clock End and that. So yeah, I think it would have been almost impossible to achieve that capacity that they wanted and all the facilities that go with a modern football ground. I mean, look at Spurs. I mean, that's the best ground I've ever visited. It's the best ground in the world now. They've set new standards, and Arsenal wouldn't have been able to have got even close, I don't think, at Highbury, as much as we love the place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that we couldn't get the revenues that the Emirates bring us or even just a smaller portion without losing the complete atmosphere and the feeling. I mean, I think the same thing has happened with West Ham. You go for the glory and you go for the money so that you can be competing with the best clubs in the world, as we were told. You lose something. And until, I think that's a great point, until there's something to look at other than individual games and Champions League qualifiers and that sort of thing that we have at Emirates, it's never really going to feel the same. From Mikey Hernandez, your goal in the European Cup final was the first Arsenal goal I ever saw, and I've been hooked ever since. So you're responsible for this. Thank you so much. Welcome back, Andy. Question: if a player you approached to sign for the Arsenal told you that he wanted to wait until it was sure whether the club qualifies for the Champions League before he signs, is that a player that you would want to come back on the club or just to sign for the club? He doesn't want to just join for the joining of Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, it's reality in the modern world. I think, if you're one of the top players, you do want to be in that prestige competition. Even if the money's right, Arsenal are satisfying your wage demands. I'm not going to say you're signing the wrong type of player because of it. It is just a fact of life. The agents get involved. But yeah, you want to be signing players for the right reason. Obviously, if they only want to come for the money, that's a different thing altogether. But if they're looking at the Champions League, that's a part of their profession. That is all to do with their football career. So that's slightly different, much different than just simply joining the club for money.
Yeah. It gives me a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, it's one thing if you're considering signing for Burnley and the Champions League is not on the table. It's another, to be signing with a fifth place Arsenal and be able to be part of the return to glory. And it just seems like too many players want to join the glory that's already there. And, that just isn't the attitude that people had 20 or 30 years ago. Add me to something great already. We see it in the NBA all the time. Here in the States, I mean, these super teams that are assembled because of our equivalent of Bosman transfers that are just completely orchestrated, so that all of a sudden the worst team in the league becomes the best team in the league. But with a team like Arsenal, even down on their luck, down on their performance over the last few years, I get the question that's being asked. If the guy doesn't want to be here just to be here and make the team great, do you really want that person here? I guess it's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, Arsenal's a world famous club, and I think most footballers in the world would have heard of them. And that kind of heritage history, I think, does attract players. It certainly attracted me. Obviously, you could be shown around Highbury in my day, and that just blew you away. But the facilities at Arsenal, with the training ground and the ground, are second to none. It's still a very attractive club, but I'll go back to that point. The top players in the world do want to be playing in the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable, but maybe they can help the club get there instead of and maybe in the situation of certain people like Alexis, the fact that they're not in it, they can look at themselves and say it's my job to get us back in it, not just say I'm going to jump off this ship and get onto one that's already in the league. But that's my that's my own point. Danny, you're back with us.
Yeah, my router, it turned itself off.
Perfect. I mean, not perfect, but perfect that you're back. We didn't do your question yet, so you wanna throw your question out there?
Certainly. Right, good job I saved these because I had to reset the computer. Right, Alan, bit of a funny one. Oh, I think it's funny. Right, do you think, like me, it's very unfair that Gary Lineker, a fellow Leicester legend, has an icons player in FIFA 19 when you don't? You won 2 English League titles. Gary won none. You both won the Cup Winners' Cup. You both won an FA Cup and a Charity Shield. You both scored goals for England, and you won 2 Golden Boots, and Gary won 0 thanks to Ian Wright at the end of 91-92 season. Is there anything you can do to fix this?
Yeah, I know he's like England's 3rd highest goal scorer, whereas I got 2. I know I won more as a player at club level, but he's a bit more famous than me, I suppose, in world football. In terms of FIFA, my voice is on there, so maybe that's enough for me. Probably haven't earned icon status just yet.
You have with us.
Yeah. Oh well, thanks, mate.
Yeah, we have programmers that have gone in and changed the coding to our versions of the game so that you're an inform 99 rated. And I've never played the game. My son does, so I may not even be making any sense. But all I know is that I just packed an inform Alan Smith today. So, do you want to, Danny? You want to start with Jake Taylor's question?
I would do, but when I reset it, I've got to go and get the
then I'll go ahead and
history.
do it.
I've got it. I've got it. Whose question was it?
Jake Taylor.
Jake Taylor. Which one? Where are we down to? Is that the first one in the questions and comments?
No. Jake Taylor at Jake23 Taylor on Twitter.
Got it. Yeah. Have you thought about joining a club at a role at the club, or is it more difficult than that? Because we're asked, Arsenal fans are always going on about we want more people who've played for the club to represent the club at board level or some other role at the club, like Freddie Lundberg does and Steve Bold has.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult. If I were to continue in my Sky career, it's difficult to, be associated with a club that much. I mean, when Thierry Henry wanted to come into the academy and Arsene Wenger says, well, you're going to have to leave Sky to do it. And you can understand that. It's funny, isn't it? Because in other European countries like Germany is a big example. So many ex-players are involved in the hierarchy there. Bayern Munich's full of them, Ajax as well. We don't do it so much in this country for whatever reason. Which is probably a shame. It might come to the point where we do copy what they do abroad. But at the moment, no, that's not something I'm considering. If Arsenal have already got a few ambassadors, haven't they? Ray Parlour, Freddie Lundberg's done some stuff. Pat Rice. I know Ray. I was with Ray the other day, and he's travelling to Baku, as is Pat Rice, doing some meeting of the fans and what have you. As it is, no, I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Excellent. Well, we're the worse off for it, but certainly it works for you and for people playing FIFA and for people watching Sky. So, from Lee Judges at Lee Mark Judges on Twitter. Alan, do you know Lee, by the way? He's a bald guy. He hangs around hospitality with a half pint of beer and
the bell, yeah.
I mean, he's worked his way into friendships with just about every Arsenal legend, so I figured you must be among them. But anyway, Lee asks, do you think Arsenal has the same appeal now compared to when you first signed for the club? Appeal to, I'm guessing, players, to sponsors. I'm not sure how he means it, but I would imagine to players.
Well, because it's a global game now, and because of the success Arsenal have had over the last 20 years under Arsene Wenger, it's probably a more famous club worldwide. Obviously, everybody knows of the Invincibles and all the players we've had, Henri Bergkamp, Pires, and the rest of them. So from that point of view, it probably is more attractive. And I think in attracting lads from abroad, being a London club counts for a lot still. The majority probably would prefer to come to London. So that's a big selling point with us. Back in the day, it wasn't the most exotic we got was David O'Leary, So, I think, as I said earlier, that the training ground and the ground, they come, they see what they've got to offer. Living in London's got to offer. It's big. It's still a big selling point, along with the name of Arsenal. It's still, I think, it's a special name, Arsenal, in the world of football still. So, if anything, probably, it's got a bigger pull than it did in my day.
Excellent. You want to go with Nate's question?
Yeah, sure. Alan, do you think Arsenal should try and build a squad around the two-striker formation going to next season? Or should Unai try and better balance the squad to maybe have a team more capable of executing his personal philosophy? He seems to be a devout 4-2-3-1 coach whenever possible in his career, but it would be a bit of, because we've got two magnificent strikers up front. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think Unai Emery is very much one horses for courses. He'll pick teams and shapes the teams according to the opposition. I mean, famously, he cuts up analysis video for hours on end on his own, and he's really absolutely obsessed with that, I think. So he'll look at certain challenges and think, well, do we want to play two up top here, or maybe have Aubameyang over on the left, or maybe have one of them on the bench, as he's done, many times this last season. It's great to see him in tandem. I mean, the two striker system's kind of gone out of fashion, hasn't it, really, over the last few years? But like anything, it comes back in fashion. It all goes in cycles, and fans love nothing more to see that kind of relationship, I think, and they have got a fantastic relationship on and off the pitch. So I think for Emery, he would try and get them both into the team as much as he possibly can.
Good. He's got a follow-up question, and the gist of it is there's been lots of rumours in the media that Arsenal, their two strikers, Aubameyang and Lacazette, both are wanted by bigger clubs. Barcelona have been looking at Lacazette. And he says, do you think if we can get 70 to 80 million for either one of those strikers, is that something you think we should do, and then try and fill the holes with younger players from the transfer market? Because that's the kind of thing Liverpool have made, haven't they? They get a great player, sell him for a fortune, and then go and get up-and-coming players.
Well, yeah, they have, but it's not easy to do. I mean, obviously, Coutinho, they got a great price for him, and it's even better when the player goes away and doesn't succeed, as Coutinho struggled with Barcelona. So, no, I wouldn't sell either of them for that kind of money, because, you're taking away your biggest strength in the side, that goal getting ability. And, if you want to get somebody in to replace them, how much is that going to cost? Probably more than you're going to sell them for. So, I think for Emery, he's looking just to add to that, to strengthen the defence, hopefully, the midfield too. Maybe get a wide player in. It'd be interesting summer, because he's not got fortunes to spend. He's going to have to be clever. But I don't think he'd consider selling either of those if he could possibly help him.
See, the way I read the question, he just asked if we could get 70 to 80 million for one of our strikers, should we sell them? And I thought immediately, absolutely, you sell Eddie Nketiah for 70 or 80 million. Nothing against Eddie, but
Aubameyang and Lacazette.
Yeah, I mean, you could do worse than that. One more question. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah. Okay.
All right, perfect. And it's from Tom Rosenhammer, and he brought this up about a week ago, because we were having a debate in a chat group of ours. And obviously this is started by the whole Tottenham and Liverpool in the Champions League final. Which is easier, which is harder, winning the Premier League or winning the Champions League? And I put up a pretty good, a pretty strong argument that I thought winning the Premier League was harder, which of course allows me to feel better once one of those two teams wins the Champions League, especially if it's Tottenham for the first time. He put up a very good argument, and I'll read his. After your answer, I'll read his responses as to why he thinks the Champions League is harder. But what are your thoughts on again, it's another comparison question, but what do you think is more prestigious in that between the Championship and the league, or harder to win? I would say.
I mean, I agree with you. I do think it's harder to win the league, especially the Premier League these days. I mean, blimey, Liverpool have got 97 points and they've come second. So. And with cup competitions, you can have a little bit of luck along the way. You're not going to win the league and just be lucky to do it. Just moments in time. Obviously, we can look at that Man City-Tottenham match where we thought Man City were through, and VAR ruled out that last-minute goal. So that they've had one or two things going in their favour. But I'm not saying they're lucky to be in the final, but I think, sometimes the best team doesn't always win a cup competition, whereas it's hard to argue that the best team hasn't won the league. And you've got to show certain characteristics, staying power, whereas you can turn it on every few weeks for the cup. You can raise your game, whereas for the league, it's week in, week out. You've got to be at it. That's why I think that's the harder one to lift.
So the takeaway from this is, Tom, I'm clearly right and you're wrong. Although I will read his points, because there's some of them are fairly interesting. It says City have bought the league at least 3 times, as have Chelsea, but you have to be very tactically astute to win away from home against Italian and Spanish sides. Many Premier League champs have tried and failed in Europe, us and Manchester City being most notable. In England, you can run and kick your way to a win. His words, not mine. Not in Europe. In UEFA, you can always get lucky in your group draw, but by the end, you'll always have to play a powerhouse or three to win the cup. The notion of it being a tournament that anyone could win died in 2005 when the sponsors really kicked money towards the repeat participants. Mourinho consistently lost to top four sides, but flat track bullied his points in games against the small team to titles and admitted as much. All your games in England are within a short plane ride or bus or train ride away. It's immeasurably more difficult to travel to other continents and win. In England, there's no threatening East Bloc or Turkish teams, some with the local police's blessing, pelting at your hotel room all night, scaring your players in the stadiums with their songs and flares and tifo, or God forbid, those Russian sub-zero temperatures. He's put a lot of thought into this.
There's a lot of points here.
Yeah, I'd play Anfield 10 times over before I volunteered to play one in Istanbul, Rome, or Moscow. Now, that's offensive because, I mean, Anfield's not an easy place to go and play and win by two clear goals. And lastly, Europe has always eluded us. If Spurs win Europe, they will always have that over us for eternity. Some good points are made, but I'm sticking to my guns. 38 games are more more telling than 10, where you're playing different teams than the other teams that are in the same competition.
Yeah, I think in the Premier League, especially these days, you're playing against different types of players, aren't you? Playing against boys from different countries, so it's not like you're in the Champions League and you're coming up against different opposition. You're kind of encountering that in the Premier League every day of the week anyway these days.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. I really appreciate you sticking around for a couple extra minutes, and thanks for joining us again. Looking forward to a nice anniversary on Sunday. I hope you enjoy it and spend it, doing something that you love. And
lovely to celebrate it a little bit later next Wednesday if the Gunners, beat Chelsea. That'd be a good way to mark it, and fantastic way to the end. And
you're not involved in the broadcast of that. It's on BT, right?
It is indeed. Yeah. So I'll be at home watching.
Okay. Well, we'll wish them well there. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe. There's a link that's coming over my shoulder in a few minutes. If you're watching this anything other than live, subscribe to the podcast. Gives us a thumbs up. Alan, where can we follow? I mean, everyone knows your Twitter account, but where can we follow you and find out what you're up to these days?
Nowhere else really.
Well, just @9smudge is the Twitter account in case you don't know it already.
Yeah, account. Yeah. But Facebook or Instagram really publicly. So I limit myself. But I hope everyone enjoyed it.
You can really get sucked in if you're on there too much. I've learned that firsthand the wrong way. Well, Danny, thank you for standing in for Andy. You're a much better looking replacement, and your head fits right into that little portico or whatever it is behind you. Is that on purpose? No. Put it back. It was fitting.
Yeah, sorry about my internet. You can blame BT for that. Hopefully, BT will make up for it in the week and broadcast us winning the Europa League. And sorry about your foot again, Alan. I'll make sure I'll never run you over again.
It's just recovering now, mate. Don't worry.
Thanks.
That was the golden boot that you ran over. All right, thanks. Cheers to everybody. Thanks for joining us in the chat, and we will hopefully see you with a happy podcast after the Europa League final. Come on, you Gooners.